see if it's working. All right. Are we on? Am I live? Apparently I am. All right. Facciamo così. See if it's working. All right. All right. Am I live? Okay. Is anybody here? Okay, let's see. All right, let's see if anybody's here. Hi there. Okay, I can't really see. Okay. So welcome everybody. Today we're going to talk about, it's called Rebbe Talks. The Rebbe Talks in Hebrew, it's called, this book, it's called Likutei Sichot. Likutei Sichot. There are 39 volumes of this. This is volume number 11. And these are the talks that Rebbe gave for many, many years. They were published, edited by the Rebbe himself and his team. And they are very, this is the written knowledge, written wisdom of the Rebbe. And it's, of course, very unique. It's very unique how the Rebbe... You should speak to my father-in-law. He can answer you the question. All right, so that's what the Likutei Sichos is. That's what we're going to talk about. And today we're going to talk about our Parsha. And what can we learn, especially in these pretty trying times? What can the Torah, because the Torah, this is one of the most famous lines of the Rebbe, he always repeated it again and again. The Rebbe said that the Torah is not in English or in Latin. They said it was called the Bible. Bible means book. So in Judaism, we don't call the book, the people of the book, because the Torah is not a book. The Torah is a book technically, but it's a book of instructions. Torah in Hebrew means hora'ah, which means it's a lesson for life. So what can the Torah teach us for how to live with coronavirus? Okay. So the Parsha begins with these words. And Moses assembled the entire assembly of the children of Israel. He assembles everybody, social distancing. And he says, these are the things that Hashem commanded to do them. And then he begins to tell what are the commandments that he's going to talk about now. He says, for a period of 6 days, work may be done, but the seventh day shall be holy for you, a day of complete rest for Hashem. Okay, so the first thing that he commands the Jews is you have to keep Shabbos. But interestingly enough, he talks about Shabbos as a commandment. There's two different commandments on Shabbat. There is the positive, which means you should keep Shabbat. There's a Kiddush and there's a Havdalah, all those different things. And then there's the negative commandment of Shabbat, which is to stay away from all the works and doing the different called melachot, all the different things that you're not supposed to do on Shabbat. So there's prohibition and there's the active respect of Shabbat. Then Moses, the Torah tells us that Moses said again. Moses said to the entire assembly of the children of Israel, saying, "This is the word that Hashem commanded, saying, take from yourselves a portion for Hashem, blah, blah, blah." And he basically tells the Jews that I want you to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So, in the Rebbe's style, these talks are called the Rashi siches. Rashi is the most fundamental and basic explanation and commentary on the Torah and on Tanakh. So the Rebbe takes a Rashi and explains it and dissects and analyzes every little detail. Why did Rashi say this? Why didn't he say this? What did he mean when he said that? So today we're going to talk about what Rashi didn't say. The whole talk about today is going to be about what not to do or not doing. So what did Rashi didn't say? What was Rashi didn't? So this is how Rashi usually works. His rule of thumb is that he's always going to ask questions that should arise in a person learning the basic, in a very basic way, the Torah. So what's interesting, the Rebbe says here, Rashi does not ask any questions. What does that mean? It means that for Rashi's evaluation, it was obvious. There was no question. Now, what are the questions that would arise from reading these few passages in the beginning of the Parsha? First, why does Moses say twice, and Moses said, you should respect Shabbat. And then Moses said, you should build the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Why doesn't he say at once, respect Shabbat and build the tabernacle? Why does he have to divide? And he said, and then again he said, it sounds like a repetition. Second question is, what? Interestingly, there's two languages about Shabbat. Zachor et Yom Shabbat lekodsho. We should remember Shabbat and to sanctify it, and Shamor et Yom Shabbat, which means guard Shabbat, which means, like I said before, the positive, remember Shabbat, do kiddush, and eat good food, good company, pray, blah, blah, blah. That's the positive aspect of Shabbat. And then there's the negative aspect of Shabbat, that is, stay away from all the prohibited actions. But interestingly, in here, the Torah says that you should respect Shabbat, which means in the positive. Now, why does the Torah bring us these two things together, the respecting Shabbat and the Mishkan? So the Talmud explains the reason they come together is because Hashem wanted to warn the Jews that as much as building the tabernacle, what was the purpose of the building tabernacle? The tabernacle was that meeting point between the infinite God and the finite world. So that's where everything went down. So building the tabernacle was such an amazing opportunity for the Jews and the world to come together and connect to the divine, to the infinite. But Hashem said, well, as much as it is important, I don't want you to desecrate Shabbos in order to build the Mishkan. So that's why they come together. So if the whole purpose of putting the two things together, Mishkan and respecting Shabbat, is to teach me that building the Mishkan should not desecrate Shabbat, then it would make more sense if the Torah said, don't desecrate Shabbat. Why does the Torah change the language and give us this positive language of saying you should keep Shabbat in a positive sense? And the last question is, when Moses, why this order? Why do we start with the respecting Shabbat and then building the Mishkan? If respecting Shabbat is only a detail of building the Mishkan, which means when you build the Mishkan, Shabbat comes, you should stop. You should not desecrate Shabbat because you're building the Mishkan. So why this order? Because if you look in the previous parashiot, when God commands Moses, he first talks about building the Mishkan, and then he talks about respecting Shabbat. So why does Moses, invert it? Why does he change the order? So the answer is that Moses, he's not just, when he talks about the commandment of Shabbat to the Jewish people, he's not just talking about the commandment of Shabbat, the one that he heard before. He's actually alluding to the commandment of Shabbat that was in the 10 commandments. And that's why he begins with first, even though God commanded him first build the Mishkan and then respect Shabbat. Yet he spoke first about Shabbat because he wanted to tell the Jews, remember, Shabbat comes from the 10 commandments. Shabbat is meaning remember all you Jews, you all heard the commandment of Shabbat. We all heard it together. So that's why Moses started with the commandment of Shabbat, because he was telling the Jews, I'm talking about Shabbat here because I want to remind you of the Shabbat that we heard at the 10 commandments at Har Sinai, at the Mount of Sinai. That's why Moses, he talks about the commandment of Shabbat in the positive sense. He says you should respect Shabbat because the language used in the 10 commandments is actually a positive language. In the 10 commandments, it says you should remember Shabbat. That's why Moses used the positive language of Shabbat to remind the Jews, I'm not just talking about to respect Shabbat, I'm talking about the Shabbat that you all heard at the 10 commandments at Mount Sinai. And that's why Moses, the Torah, I should say, separated the 2 commandments. He said, and Moses said, you should respect Shabbat. And then Moses said, you should build the tabernacle. Because Moses was to tell the Jews, these are 2 very different things. The 10 commandments are a completely different and very unique commandment that we heard from God. We heard directly from God, because one of the miracles that happened on Mount Sinai was that when God, in one word, God said, we heard all the 10 commandments. So that's very unique about the 10 commandments. And this is why Rashi didn't need to explain all these things. Why the repetition? And he said. Why does Moses change the order that God commanded him? First Shabbat and then the Mishkan. And why does he talk about Shabbat in a positive sense? Because he's alluding to the commandment, the 10 commandments, the Shabbat that all the Jews heard about in the 10 commandments. Now, okay, very nice. All technical stuff. I don't know if you understood all this. But the question is, what's the difference? Okay, he said first Shabbat, and then the Mishkan, and then build the tabernacle. What's the difference? What's the lesson? We know the Torah is meant to be a lesson for our life. Especially, the Torah is a lesson for our life in any circumstance, anywhere we find ourselves, in any time, even 2020 in California. And the lesson is like this. Building the Mishkan, as I said before, building the tabernacle is an incredible opportunity, an incredible event. Building the tabernacle was a way for a finite human being to connect to the infinite God and to access, not only to connect to the divine, but to access and turn on the divine that's within. So building the Mishkan, it was not just something that happened 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, I should say. But building the Mishkan means, honestly, everything that we do in our life. whenever we are, because we all are tabernacles of, we're all meant to make ourselves a temple for God. What does it mean, a temple for God? A place where God feels comfortable. So everything that we do, we can go to the gym, when we go grocery shopping, when we take out the garbage, when you go for a jog, and even when you go to the bathroom, all these things could become a temple for God. If after the bathroom you recognize there's a beautiful blessing called Asher Yatzar, you recognize the wonder, the fact that God separates the bad from the good, and that we are alive and we have no problems. I'm talking about inside problems. So there's the beautiful blessing, thanking God that that I'm healthy, that I everything is working. So all these things are meant to be. We are meant to be a temple for God. Make ourselves a tabernacle for God. Now, what is the problem? A problem arises when you think, okay, this is the most important thing of all. I have to make my everything about myself a temple for God, which means I have to find ways to incorporate my life to invite God into my life. Now, what happens? What happens if you want to build the tabernacle, which means you want to make some part of your life part to make it godly? You want to bring God into some part of your life. But what if there's something in that idea, and there's something, let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say I want to jog, okay? And jogging is a great thing. I can jog for the right reasons. I can jog to be healthy so I can serve God. And I can serve God, much better when I'm healthy and I take care of myself. But what if, for example, right now, by jogging, you might put other people in danger? So the Torah, even though the Torah says, yes, everything in your life should be a home for God, should be about making a home for God, but yet you should know there are guidelines, there are standards, there are rules. And therefore, yes, as much as it is important to make every part of your life a home for God, you have to know there are guidelines. And I think this situation of the coronavirus is a perfect example. And we spoke about this yesterday also. The shul is closed, and we can't say Kaddish, and we can't hear the Torah. Tomorrow we're going to bless the month. So you might think to yourself, what do you mean? We have to make everything a home for God. So let's go to shul. Let's meet with people. Let's jog. Let's jog and let's be healthy. Let's do everything we can to make a home for God. But here is the lesson from this talk. Here is the lesson that the Torah is teaching us. It's not about, ultimately, making a home for God is about making a home for God. It's not about doing what makes you feel good, what makes you feel purposeful, makes you feel, meaning, makes your life meaningful. The purpose is to make a home for God. If God Himself makes it that you right now have to be, so to speak, let's say unproductive, not productive, that you should stay at home, not get things done, and honestly, when you're home, it's harder to get things done, especially if you have kids or whatnot. So this is where God says, yes, it's important to build the Mishkan, it's important to build the tabernacle, but do not desecrate Shabbat. Do not overlook the rules and the guidelines. Do not go away. Do not, don't just think in productivity. If God wants you to be unproductive, so to speak, then this is the most productive way to make a home for God. And this is the key. When it's about making a home for God, then you do it on God's terms. God doesn't want you to desecrate Shabbat. God doesn't want you to go out and be productive and meet people, then this is the best way to make a home for God. This is the best way to be productive, and you will be successful. So that's the lesson from this class, and I definitely want to make put it out there. This week, when we just read the words, Moses brought everybody together, all the Jews together, and he spoke to them about respecting Shabbat. So I think this week or tomorrow, no, today's Thursday. So this Shabbat, starting tomorrow at sunset, in Carlsbad, we're talking about at 6:42. 6:42 is when it's candle lighting. So I suggest and I urge you to try. Don't go for grocery shopping on Shabbat. Put everything away for the next. Don't go on, you don't have to. Do go in the car. Turn off your phone for one day, for 25 hours. No Facebook, no email. Disconnect. Right now we're all disconnected in some way. Maybe more the touch disconnection, but we're definitely connected virtually. But I urge you to try it. Cook everything before sunset. Enjoy a real restful and peaceful Shabbat. No car, no electricity. Of course, it doesn't mean you have to, turn on the light from the day before. Keep it on. Ask your rabbi how to do it exactly. But I am telling you, this is an incredible opportunity. This is your chance to really try and feel that inner connection with Hashem, with yourself, with your family, and I think this is a great lesson for our life. Being right now not being productive as much as we were before the coronavirus, because it's about making a home for God. It's not about you. It's about God. It's about our mission. Therefore, the best way to do it is by following the guidelines, following the rules. That's what's going to make a home for God, even in the unproductive sense of the word. I don't know if that makes sense. All right, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your day. More light, more darkness goes away. So read Torah, go on Chabad.org. Listen, you can listen to the previous lives on Chabad at La Costa, and most importantly, keep a good attitude, stay positive, and I will see you later today. There's more to come, more on Chabad at La Costa for the kids. Shabbat Shalom.